You also can ask her if she knows what certain words say. Yes, but why? If she doesn't know, it won't make playing that game more peaceful or joyful. You can always open up the discussion with her and talk about how she likes to learn and what way fits best for her on her terms. If the child has already asked for help in the form of the mom reading to her, then that question has been answered. That exchange came from a Facebook group that I joined to learn about a process called radical unschooling. This mom is concerned that a 9-year-old, a child who would be in roughly 3rd to 4th grade, the age where I was devouring the Junie B. Jones books and starting to read my all-time favorite series, The Babysitter's Club, she is concerned that a child that age does not yet know her letters and isn't making any progress on learning to read. When one user comes in with a few helpful suggestions about how to maybe incorporate reading lessons into playing video games, the admin of the group, an unschooling influencer named Sandra Dodd, comes in to shut that down and say, no, you shouldn't try to teach her to read. That's only going to frustrate her. Don't teach your kid to read. Don't teach your kid anything. This is the dark side of radical unschooling. You may have seen some of the viral TikToks that have been making the news, showing some of the more extreme views on unschooling, like this one.
So we don't teach our children anything. Everything that they learn is in response to either their interests or their questions. We have no curriculum, we have no school hours. We really just respond whenever they want to know something and do our best to make sure they really get it.
Don't worry, we are going to break that one down in full, but for a quick spoiler, this woman is a new age influencer who sells books and courses about manifestation and sex magic, and as we'll see when we look at some of her other unschooling videos, her kids aren't learning shit. Or maybe you've seen other viral posts like this one.
Issue of unschooling, we're at the park learning how to have fun. But before you get your panties in a wad, listen. Yes, we're going to be doing reading and writing and math and maybe science, but it's not going to look the same as traditional public school. It's going to be different. There's so many comments in my comment section about, well, what if they want to be a doctor or a lawyer? And I think I've already mentioned this before one time already, but like the likelihood of my kids wanting to do something that they don't see that I'm normalizing is very slim. On top of I'm very proactive inside of my profession and my career of being an entrepreneur, they're likely going to follow that path because they're going to see how successful.
Spoiler alert, when this woman says she's an entrepreneur, she means she sells for the multi-level marketing company Prove It, and through multiple videos like this one, we can see some red flags that she sees her kids as more of a future downline than as any type of autonomous beings. I've seen a few other creators posting videos on this topic, and once I started diving into the research for this, I realized I had so much to say. Hi, I'm Savvy. I'm an author, I'm an editor, and I'm a former creative writing teacher. I used to teach creative writing workshops, extracurricular classes, field trips, things like that, all throughout different schools in Chicago, including public schools, private schools, Catholic schools, alternative schools, partially online schools, you name it. And let me say, from my teaching experience, I can see a few sides to this discussion. No matter which school I was teaching in, whether the kids were 8 years old or 15 years old, regardless of what neighborhood they were from or their average family income level, regardless of their racial or religious background, all kids love having the chance to be creative. I got the privilege of getting to be the fun teacher, the teacher who wasn't grading you, the teacher who could encourage you to try new things in your writing and explore whatever creative paths your mind went down, because my class wasn't part of the core subjects and it wasn't part of the kids' required grades. So to an extent, I can see where parents might see some benefit in this concept of unschooling, and I'm going to break that down in a moment. But like any concept that does have roots in a positive idea, there are always going to be grifters who take it too far, to use it to sell their shitty courses, use it to recruit people into their downlines. And what's especially upsetting about this topic is that children and their educations and their future are the collateral damage. Today, we are going to dive into the insane world of radical unschooling. We'll look at some of the most heinous influencers using this concept to make a quick buck off of the backs of children who can't read. We'll look at ways that this is contributing to our literacy crisis, and we'll talk about what's really important when it comes to the general concept of education. This one's gonna be a lot, so buckle up.
It's just a nut.
Yeah, you effing.
Top yours, wolf. We'll see who counts.
Starts online.
Hi everyone, welcome back back to my channel. I'm Savvy and this is Savvy Writes Books. On this channel we do book reviews, media analysis, and video essays about book publishing and education and things like that. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because I put out new videos like this one every couple of weeks. Before we get too deep into the topic, I want to give a quick thank you to my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much to everyone who supports this channel. You guys make it possible for me to be able to keep putting out videos that are this long as often as I do, so I greatly appreciate that. If anyone out there is interested in getting access to behind-the-scenes stuff, blog posts, occasionally bonus videos and book discussions and things like that, please consider joining my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. So let's start with some background information. Unschooling is a term that was coined by a former educator named John Holt. Back in the 1970s, Holt, who had been extremely critical of the public school system, had become a strong advocate for homeschooling, and he wrote a series of books including things like Freedom and Beyond, which was a book encouraging educators to allow children more autonomy in their lessons in class, followed by some more radical works like Escape from Childhood, in which he argued that children deserve 100% equal rights to adults, meaning like the right to vote, the right to work, the right to earn equal income. Yeah, I love when you start off as a hippie and then you eat your tail so hard that you end up advocating for child labor just 2 years later. Okay, Holt is considered the father of the unschooling movement. Most of us have heard of homeschooling. Instead of going to a traditional public or private school, kids instead learn at home. And homeschooling can take a variety of different forms. For example, one of the alternative schools that I taught at had kids who were like half homeschool. They do school online at home 4 days a week, and then 1 day a week they'd come into this community center classroom for in-person lessons, one of which was my creative writing class. This gave students the ability to learn at their own pace at home, but also to have dedicated time learning, to work collaboratively with other students in person in a classroom environment. I think a lot of parents have very valid reasons for wanting to homeschool their kids. The biggest one I've seen is an increase in violence in public schools and wanting your children protected from that potential physical harm. Maybe you have a child who is neurodivergent in a way that the public schools in your area don't have the resources to properly accommodate. Maybe your child has a learning disability that requires an approach that the schools near you don't have the ability to do. These are all fine reasons to seek alternative ways for educating your child. I've also seen some parents whose motivations for homeschooling aren't so good, like the parents who don't want their kids learning about evolution, so they homeschool them to make sure that the kids only have access to the exclusive information that they provide. Overall, though, I do think it's fair for parents to have the freedom to homeschool their kids if they so choose, as long as they're still making sure that their kids get a full, well-rounded education. So yes, even if you personally don't believe in evolution, you still have to teach your kids that the theory of evolution exists and what the ideas are behind it. Because in order for kids to learn to form their own opinions and have their own beliefs, you have to make sure that they have access to the wealth of knowledge available. That's why most states do require that homeschooling parents submit proof that their child is actually making academic progress. For example, you can take a look at this map posted by the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, or HSLDA. States in green have very low government regulation of the homeschooling process, and these states do not require parents to notify any government or educational agencies about their child's homeschooling process. Let's take a look at some of the differences here, okay? For example, Pennsylvania, a state highlighted in red, has high regulation. What does homeschooling look like in Pennsylvania? Well, first of all, Pennsylvania law requires that if a parent wants to be their child's primary educator, that parent must at least have the equivalent of a high school diploma, and they also must file paperwork with their local district superintendent. These laws also require 900 hours of schooling per year, so you do have to log the hours that your child actually spends learning. There's a list of subjects that your child is required to learn, including reading and spelling, basic arithmetic, some U.S. history, the typical subjects. Then, in order to complete the grade, your child has to go through an evaluation to prove that they actually did the work and they actually learned the material. This information is required to be submitted to the government by the end of June annually. The state of Pennsylvania also recognizes 3 other options for homeschooling, including hiring a private tutor for your child, if you don't have the credentials or the experience to be that educator, or enrolling your child in an online school type of program. Honestly, I think this is pretty good. It looks like for the most part the state of Pennsylvania cares that all of the kids learn to read. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it seems like they're trying, okay? Now let's look at Idaho, a state with one of the lowest sets of regulations. The page for the Idaho homeschooling laws is a mere 3 paragraphs, and it includes highlights like this. Idaho does not require homeschool parents to possess any particular qualifications, obtain school district approval, or test their children. If your public school district asks for information about your homeschool program, you are not legally required to furnish it. And under Idaho law, you can teach your children yourself. Alternatively, you can have another family member, relative, or unrelated person teach your children. And you must teach your child subjects that are commonly and usually taught in the public schools of Idaho. We recommend that parents provide instruction in language arts, math, science, and social studies in grades 1 to 10 with additional flexibility in grades 11 and 12. I said that those were going to be some highlights I was going to read, but I actually just ended up reading you the whole thing. That's it. That's all the requirements in Idaho. Basically, if you live in a state with these type of laws, you can just choose not to teach your kid, and you probably won't face many consequences, if any. Because these laws vary so wildly by state, it becomes very easy for some parents to abuse the system. And in just a moment, we're going to take a look at some parents who are doing just that. But first, I do want to say that I completely understand why some parents may not fully trust the public school system. There are more than enough valid critiques to make of the way that education functions in the US. And for this video, I am going to focus on the US specifically because it's the only country where I've ever lived, the only country where I've ever gone to school, the only country where I've ever taught students, things like that. A lot of parents are concerned about the ways that public schools haven't been updated really that much in terms of their structure since the days of preparing kids for factory work during the Industrial Revolution. Why are we still preparing kids for 45-minute shifts with 5-minute breaks in between, a 20-minute lunch break, and the summer off so that you can do farm labor for your family? To many parents, having that as the one standard structure seems very outdated. Similarly, the ways that kids are incentivized to learn can feel outdated as well. As many parents will point out, no matter which side of the aisle they come from on this issue, kids do love to learn. Kids' brains are like little sponges constantly soaking up information that they're taking in from all around them. That's why it's so much easier to learn a second language as a child, and why it's easier to learn to read when you're a child than it is when you're an adult. Kids' brains are just so hungry for knowledge. But as many parents will point out, sometimes that desire for knowledge dies out in the classroom. When kids are stressed about getting good grades or worried that they're going to mess up on an assignment and get a bad grade and compromise their entire future, the process of learning goes from something exciting to something stressful, to something with stakes and consequences. In my experience, there's a lot of truth to this. When I taught creative writing in a classroom with no grades, it took my students so long to get out of the mindset of having a set of requirements that they had to follow. In one of the first creative writing classes I ever taught, our first lesson just involved getting kids out of their own heads so that they could start to write a story about whatever they wanted. Kids were raising their hands, they kept asking questions like, is it okay if my story has a monster? Is it okay if my story doesn't take place in the real world? To which I kept having to answer, yes, you can write a story about whatever you want. This is from your imagination. There are no limits. I'm not grading you on this. I want to see how creative you can be. But still, it was this hurdle that the kids had to overcome. They had to get themselves out of that mindset of, what does the teacher specifically want me to do to have completed the task successfully? To an extent, I can agree that the systems we have where we're grading everything on a specific rubric and we're assigning numerical scores to creative assignments, that's not always the best process. Thankfully, there are a lot of other methods out there for teaching. When I worked as a music journalist, I once interviewed a music teacher who had open studio hours in her music classroom. She'd teach the kids the basics of music in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Then from 4th through 6th grade, the students could use her class period to try out different instruments, to come up with their own music project ideas, and then she would approve those projects. The kids could spend all semester doing things like forming their own bands, or writing a music soundtrack to go to the movie, or learning how to play the tuba, whatever they wanted. And along the way, she would check in with them, give them bits of feedback, not grade each piece of the performance on a numerical scale, but tell them what was going well and what they should improve on to fully complete the project. It was never like, oh, you're going to get a 75% for today's class participation. It was more like, here's what you're doing well, here's what you need to add to that, here's what you need to work on and improve on, and at the end of the semester, you need to complete your project, and this is what a completed project is going to look like. Teaching methods like these are becoming more commonplace, and I think that that's amazing. I also once interviewed this teacher whose classes used a concept called failing forward. Basically, his philosophy was, if you fail at a task, that can be a good thing because it means you've gained experience. He didn't give kids tests with grades that accumulated over the quarter. Instead, he would regularly monitor kids' progress and give bits of feedback, and then ask them questions to see what they learned after trying different activities, whether they accomplished their goals or not. These methods of teaching don't involve stressing kids out about the potential of failing at an assignment and ruining their GPA or their future. They allow kids to learn at different paces, to have varying amounts of adult involvement in different steps of the process, and to learn from their mistakes. But they also have a goal in mind. Every teacher still has a concrete objective that their students need to finish by the end of the class. Even if each kid takes a different path to arrive at this destination, they all still know what the goal is. They understand the learning objective. This is what radical unschooling is missing. I am going to specify radical unschooling here because in my research on this topic, I did come across some unschooling parents who do have their hearts in the right place and some who were even educating their children fairly successfully. I saw a lot of parents in Reddit threads and in Facebook groups who use the term unschooling rather than homeschooling because they don't have specific school hours, they don't do tests and units and break things down by subject, but they do still have learning objectives for their kids. They are still monitoring their kids' progress to make sure that they accomplish each of those milestones and hit those objectives. For example, these parents, instead of doing like a formal, this is English class from noon to 1 type of thing, they might use different types of games throughout the day to teach their kids to read. They might sign them up for a summer science camp. A lot of these parents had their kids using educational things on sites like Khan Academy. A lot of these kids did know how to read and they did know how to count and add basic numbers and things like that by a normal age to do that. But it's when you get into radical unschooling territory that things can get really messy. And I don't know what the legality on this is. I think some of this needs to be looked into by the authorities, okay? Some of this is straight up child neglect. Radical unschooling happens when you not only take your kids out of school, you not only don't homeschool them, but you fundamentally disagree with the concept of your kids being taught. You don't teach them to read, you don't teach them to count, you don't teach them their letters, you let them learn through experience, which in a lot of cases leads to the child not learning anything at all. Let's start with probably the most egregious unschooling influencer on TikTok right now, Miss Mommy Onami. Onami is an influencer on TikTok with over 200,000 followers. She wants to sell you a book called 9 Lines, The Initiation to the Enneagram, which is all about, I don't fucking know, I can't understand it, and I am someone who learned how to read. Her website gives this ebook away for free as a way to get your email address so that she can then sell you a masterclass bundle on black, white, and red magic. Interesting, Onami. You want to sell me a class? So when it comes to learning about red magic and enneagrams and whatever, you can see the value in someone teaching you something, yet you don't teach your kids to read? Let's take another look at her viral TikTok and then we're going to break down some of these posts.
So we don't teach our children anything. Everything that they learn is in response to either their interests or their questions. We have no curriculum, we have no school hours. We really just respond whenever they want to know something and do our best to make sure they really get it. And my big fear about preschooling was that if my kids only went towards what they were interested in, saving all of their real estate only for things they're interested in, not cramming it with anything necessary, I was concerned that they would never be interested in things like reading and writing and math. My son's 6, and it took some patience and not comparing myself to other moms, but this is his book. Look at this. Lamp.
Defenses are up.
Jaw. Lion. This is him doing this by himself. Copying down words from other places, asking us more. Same with addition. What's 7 plus 5? It will come at the right time.
I got us covered.
If you do not like this idea of sending your kids away for 40 hours a week and then wondering why they have no energy to do anything else, you are not interested in forming the trust that you can follow their interests and they will learn everything they need to learn, not what other people need them to learn.
Okay, a couple questions I have after watching this. When your son asked, Mom, what's 7 plus 5? What did you say? I need to know what your answer was to that. Did she just say 12 and that's it? Did she say a different number because she also doesn't know what 7 plus 5 is? Or did she actually sit down with her son and show him how to figure out the answer to 7 plus 5? Will he just remember 7 plus 5 is 12? What if tomorrow he needs to know what 7 plus 6 is instead? Is he going to be able to figure that out based on the knowledge that you taught him? Or is he going to have to ask his mom every single time? I honestly don't know. Next question. When your son is copying down words trying to learn to write, is he just trying to mimic like the lines and shapes of the letters he sees, or does he actually know what these words say? I've seen a lot of people making fun of this TikTok saying things like, oh my god, he's 6 and that's the best he can write. I was writing full sentences at 6. And yeah, I mean, same, I was too. But it is true that kids learn reading and writing at vastly different rates, and that is okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But my question is whether he's actually learning to write, or if he's just bored and he's just copying down things he sees around him. If he's just like copying lines and shapes. Does he know what these words say? Is he actually reading? There is a big difference there. Now, when I first found Onami, I kind of wondered if she was actually a parody account because of this particular post that she had. Just watch this.
I need you guys' help because I really want to vote, and I don't know if I should vote Democrat or Republican. And so I was hoping that you guys could tell me who the son is, because whoever is definitely God's favorite, and I want to vote for whoever God's favorite is.
Like, that's something one of my dolls would say when they're playing a character in one of my skits, and I can't even decide which doll. Honestly, I have too much respect for all of my dolls to even imagine any of them saying things like this. Even Felicity. Like, if Felicity's too good for this even, okay? The further I got along in her profile, though, I realized, no, this woman's actually serious.
It's true. My son cannot read at age 6. There's never going to be a time in my life where I can say, yeah, my son started reading when he was 5 years old. He's on the Waldorf and Montessori schedule. It's different. But here's the thing about my kid.
Turrets online.
He's always
We're staying this fight.
And every single day of his life is a blank canvas. He can
Go
make
home and
whatever
save yourself
art he
some
wants
time.
with. Discovery, adventure, art, play, interest. This is what his day is made up of. There's no conformity. There's no needing to pretend that you're sick in order to get a day off. There's no trends. There's no ahead or behind. There's just being free, exactly the way that you are. Free to learn at your own pace. And there are so many
Gotta get as many of these up as I can.
that will know so much more than me. Inmates get law degrees, get all kinds of stuff. And there's so many inmates that would say, look, this is just the way that it is. This has been a really good thing for me. Everybody else is doing it. We don't live in a creative world. This is just what it is. But would any of those inmates not trade in all of these things they've gotten used to for a chance at being free? For a chance to hold the sun on their face every single day? That's what all
Let's see him dodge this.
So what do you mean when you say your son is free? You just mean that he's not in prison? Like, okay, I'm glad your 6-year-old isn't in prison. Congratulations. You do realize that there are people out there who can read and also aren't in prison, though. Right? Like, this isn't an either-or kind of situation. Actually, from my English teacher resources, I have a poem written. I'll talk about this right now. Back when I was teaching poetry workshops, I'd often show my students this poem, this slam poetry performance performed by this writer named Lamont Carey. His poem is called I Can't Read. During his performance, he takes the audience through his time struggling to learn to read as a kid, and how, because he was a talented athlete and he was a basketball star, nobody ever pressured him to learn how to read. The school system kept kind of pushing him to the next grade because they wanted him to be on the high school basketball team and things like that. And again, this poem includes some pretty valid critiques of the public school system, let's be real. His parents had high hopes for him going to the NBA and helping them out of poverty. Unfortunately, during a high school game, a collision on the court caused him to snap his knee, leading to the permanent end of his basketball career. He ends the poem with this line.
So now I'm asking y'all, without my option,
Putting down a turret.
can't read.
In real life, before he was able to learn to read as an adult, Lamont Carey did find himself out of options, and for a while he got involved in a gang before he ended up going to prison. For him, freedom came from learning to read. Now he's a poet, he's a writer. During the darkest time in his life, he experienced a lack of freedom from being in prison, and also a lack of freedom that came with illiteracy. That's all to say that not knowing how to read is the opposite of freedom. It is trapping you by making you unable to access one of the biggest forms of human communication that holds a wealth of knowledge, which can open up so many doors for you. And all of the top comments on Onami's post agree with this. Reading is the key to all knowledge. Hey mama, my son is also free and I homeschool, but we also learned how to read. I hope this helps. Montessori schedule has kids reading and sounding out words at age 4 or 5. Reading is extremely important. I wonder what will happen to the kids that had a free childhood when they have to make money to live as adults, unless they're independently wealthy. I think a common misconception that many adults have about the ways that humans learn to read is that it's this natural process, the same way we learn to listen or learn to speak, but that's actually not true. Reading is not a trait that humans just gained through evolution. It is a concept we invented. It is a skill that needs to be learned. I think part of the problem here could be that because most of us learn to read as kids and most adults don't have clear memories of their early childhoods, most people don't actually remember the process of learning to read the same way most of us don't remember learning to speak. But that doesn't mean that it happened naturally. Think back to the days of centuries past. Remember when literacy was a privilege for the nobility and that reading was not a skill that the peasants were offered? Why didn't the peasants just learn to read naturally? Back in the days when only the wealthy went to school or had home tutoring, why didn't poor people just look at books and things around them and just pick it up the way that, because reading is not a thing we naturally pick up. It's a thing we have to be taught and put in effort to learn. And yes, some kids will learn to read more easily than others. Some kids do teach themselves to read the same way that some kids can teach themselves to play an instrument while other kids need a music teacher. Regardless, it is a process that must be learned. This was actually a huge topic in the 2000s when educators were getting really deep into a topic called reading wars. I may actually make a whole video essay on the reading wars. Let me know if you're interested in that. There's a podcast mini-series about this. I highly recommend it. It's called Sold a Story, and I'll link it in the description below. Basically, this podcast covers the different methods that teachers have used over the decades when teaching kids to read, and how a new method created by a teacher named Lucy Calkins took over public schools in the 2000s. This method involved foregoing phonics instruction and memorization in exchange for focusing on kids learning to read through reading. Only one problem, you can't learn to love reading if you can't read. Her method suffered from serious confirmation bias, and that's because it was built off of the theories developed in the 1970s by an educator from New Zealand named Marie Clay, who found that good readers were able to fill in words and meanings based on context rather than having to sound out every word. So she began teaching that as her method, which she called reading recovery, to the students in her class who were struggling. Many of them at first thrived under this system. Learning phonics and memorizing sounds is very boring, whereas reading books can be very interesting. And in easy early reading level books, when you can guess a word from context, it's usually going to be right. That is until you're learning multi-syllabic words and reading books with more complex themes, and next thing you know, you realize that you actually didn't know how to read the letters and which letters connect to which sounds. The reason good readers were already able to do this so early is that they'd already mastered phonics. They already had that piece of the puzzle down. Those kids were just by chance developmentally further along at a younger age. Nowadays, in response to this failure, which led to an increase in functional illiteracy among children in elementary and middle school, a new approach has come out called the science of reading, which is built on an understanding of how kids' memories store information and how they need a certain level of basic information before they'll be able to apply it. The fact that humans can look at letters, which are just a series of lines, and we can immediately associate that with a sound that we hear, and then we can associate groupings of those lines with groups of sounds that we can then instantly translate to a meaning that has application in our real lives. That is an incredible feat of humanity. There are so many complicated processes going on in our brains to make that happen. But first, we need to memorize what the letters look like and what visuals go with what sounds. If we don't have that memorized, we can't progress further without being extremely frustrated. When is the best time for our brains to memorize a ton of information, like all of these visuals going with all of these sounds and what they look like? That time is childhood, when your brain is all squishy and malleable. Teach your kids to read, please. So then I found this post on Onami's TikTok. The thumbnail says, unschooling leads to sober kids. So I thought, okay, maybe she's concerned about the public high schools in her area. Maybe they're having issues with teenagers drinking underage or trying drugs. Maybe there's that type of problem in these schools. No, that's not what it's about.
Putting small children on amphetamines because they cannot sit for a 40-hour work week is insane.
I gotta look after my crew.
Children need to move, and children learn by asking questions. The symptoms of ADHD, and there's been a 300% increase in the misdiagnosis of this, by the way. Fidgeting, inability to concentrate, repeating tasks, depression, boredom, anxiety. This is a result of putting the kid in a 40-hour work week when they're a child, not a result of the kid having a problem. Of this percentage that's diagnosed with ADHD, 69% will be put on medication. There is a 70% chance that your kid will end up on one of the strongest drugs available as a child and not be able to get off simply because of their inability to behave like a 40-year-old when they're 5. If you don't like these options, you have a choice. You can do things differently. It doesn't take that
All
much
right, buddy,
time,
give 'em
but
hell.
it takes a lot of confidence.
We're not dying.
There's nobody that cares more about their kids' education than you. There's nobody that knows them better than you. There's nobody that can educate them better
Gotta
than
build me
you.
some backup.
And if you need the childcare, that's okay, but I'm done confusing the need for
Demolition
childcare
time.
with a good education. They're different.
That's right, it's actually about how ADHD is fake and your kid is only sober if you don't medicate them. Wild how I wrote the script for this video while I was on my ADHD medication. Thankfully, the comments
around
agree
here somewhere.
for the most part, not all of them, but the top ones do. My ADHD made me unable to communicate that I understood what was happening,
more
but couldn't get my
firepower.
brain to focus
Need
and
some
work out the answers. I was filled with rage and sadness until I was medicated. I wish I got the medication I needed for ADHD. The main problem the medicine targets is difficulty focusing on important things like school, something that is extremely difficult to treat without medicine. Also, real quick, before we move on, what does her shirt say? Does her shirt, does it actually say, yeah, I guess that is the one upside to the fact that your kids can't read. Eventually, we do get to a video where she says the quiet part out loud.
The whole interview where it's about, like, you know, the dangers of unschooling, and the person, there was like a homeschooling expert that was like, well, my concern is that they're not going to be civic-minded members of a functioning democracy. First of all, it's dysfunctional, but second of all, that's the whole point, is to not pump out more civic-minded members of a functioning democracy. Lol, so...
So keeping your kids uneducated and unable to participate in a civic-minded democracy is a feature, not a bug. This is a big concern that a lot of people have, that unschooling parents are going to limit their kids' freedom just to turn them into a clone of themselves. And no one is exemplifying that better than the boss babe, Kelsey Ray. Kelsey Ray is a TikTok influencer with nearly 1 million followers. She uses her following to sell ketones for the multi-level marketing company
Gotta build me
Prove
some
It.
backup.
Unschooling, we're at the park learning how to have fun. Before you use your panties in a wad, listen. Yes, we're going to be doing reading and writing and math and maybe science, but it's not going to look the same as traditional public school. It's going to be different. There's so many comments in my comment section about, well, what if they want to be a doctor or a lawyer? And I think I've already mentioned this before one time already, but like the likelihood of my kids wanting to do something that they don't see that I'm normalizing is very slim. On top of I'm very proactive inside of my profession and my career of being an entrepreneur, they're likely going to follow that path because they're going to see how successful. I'm also going to teach them the right way. How many doctors and lawyers and, you know, other professions do you see where they're literally in debt? And most of these people are miserable. Most of them. I don't know that I've seen a doctor or a lawyer that's like so happy and, like I said, not in debt. And that's my goal with my kids, is I don't want them to experience being in debt. I'm going to teach them finances and money. And yeah, you do learn that shit in school, but how many of you guys actually utilized it and learned it in a real world way? And so, day 2, unschooling. We are going to the library, maybe some thrift stores to find some books just to read. We're gonna make it a point in our nighttime routine to read every single night. So read, writing, math, and just doing it in different ways than just sitting down as you normally would in public school. So, follow.
So, you know a lot of doctors and lawyers who are in debt and who are miserable. Cool. I know a lot of people who used to be in MLM companies like yours who were also in debt and miserable from the MLM company. Also, the criticism wasn't saying your kids are definitely going to want to be doctors and lawyers. It was, okay, but what if that's what your kid wants? Aren't you just closing that option off to them by not educating them? But once again, ignorance is a feature, not a bug. She says right here that she wants her kids to do the things they see her normalizing. In her case, that's not being an entrepreneur, it's selling for an MLM company, which has an over 99% chance of causing you to lose money. But let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that your kids actually do want to be real, honest entrepreneurs when they grow up. The podcast I mentioned earlier, called Sold a Story, has an episode about a guy named Dan Corcoran who didn't learn to read until he was in his 50s. As an adult, he had very limited options available to him, which is why he went to the military, and then after that started working in construction. As a construction worker, he realized that one day he'd like to run his own company to install ramps, bars, and other things that would make buildings more accessible with disabled veterans in mind, especially after his own time in the military. But before he could run his own business, it was key that he knew how to read. He met a reading teacher named Nora when he was 54 years old, and he offered her a trade. He would do all the work to paint her new tutoring center if she would teach him how to read. After being alive for half of a century, after seeing words around him all the time, after hearing all these words, after having plenty of life experience living in the real world, Dan still did not know how to read because he had never nailed down the specific skill of seeing a letter, instantly connecting it to a sound, and then having your brain be able to quickly and immediately put that all together into a word that you instantly recognize. So that skill is what his new teacher taught him. As he explains in the podcast interview, the interviewer asks, "What did she teach you about the way words worked that unlocked them for you a little bit better?" And he says, "Sounds, drawing them out with your finger, writing them on the whiteboard just over and over and over again, and the next thing you know, you can you got it, that's December." This is how people learn to read. You might not remember doing this because you were very young when you learned, but sounding out words and decoding letters is a necessary part of the process. After learning to read, Dan eventually did start up his own company, and at the end of the interview, he talked about how reading has been a necessity for his career as a business owner. The interviewer says, "A couple more questions. How has it changed your life to be able to read better?" He replies, "Much, much better. Not scared to try things. I've started a couple businesses since I've learned how to read." The interviewer says, "Could you have started those businesses without the reading skills you have now?" And he says, "No, no way. No, you gotta read contracts. You have to read reports. You just gotta read. I mean, there's so much, but also I question a lot. My sons, it drives them nuts that I question contracts. I question words in contracts. But if we don't know what that means, we could end up for lawsuits or in trouble." There you have it, Kelsey Ray. Even if your kids don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, even if they want to be an entrepreneur, they still need to know how to read. They still need basic math. They still need these skills that you learn in school, because without them, they will lack the basic knowledge and reasoning skills to successfully run a business. But something tells me that Kelsey doesn't actually care about her kids becoming an entrepreneur, and she just wants them to join her downline so that she can make more money off of them.
My neighbor did unschooling with her children, and it was very sad to see, even as teenagers, they could not read. You want to know what I'm tired of fucking seeing? I am so tired of seeing these grown people who are unschooled or homeschooled, or even just, people who have never tried it, saying how bad it is and how uneducated. You want to know the real reason of why people who had a really bad unschooling or homeschooling experience is that they have laziness. When you do unschooling, it is 100% up to the parent to be proactive with things and teaching them things, not just letting them sit in front of the TV or the tablet or just like, go figure it out, just go learn what you want to learn. Like, you have to take the lead on it. And no, you don't have to have a GED or a diploma. Let me tell you something. Everything that I know that makes me multiple six figures a year from my phone, I learned in my 20s. In my 20s. And I learned it from my fucking phone. And so if I'm going to teach my kids anything, it's going to be being resourceful, being resilient, and going after the fucking things that you love and that make you happy. But I'm just here to say that, like, if you had an unsuccessful unschooling experience or a homeschooling experience, it was because your parents were lazy and they slacked, okay? They had no boundaries, they didn't make you do anything, because in the world of unschooling, people are like, oh, you just leave it up to the kids. The kids have complete autonomy over what they want to learn. But with that being said, you still have to set boundaries. So I'll explain that in another video and kind of like break it down of how I'm seeing what unschooling means and like what it looks like for me.
No, you did not learn everything in your 20s from your phone. You needed to know how to read in order to learn anything from your phone. And I'm pretty confident you learned that as a child in school. And yes, it's true that it is up to the parents. But by normalizing the concept of parents not having to teach their kids anything, not setting up any markers for what ages they should master certain concepts by, or else they might need extra help, by not having any way of evaluating that, even if we don't do formal tests, by not having any metric to evaluate that by, if it remains legal and socially acceptable for parents to do this, that's how the bad and lazy parents are able to get away with it. Let's look at a day of unschooling with Kelsey Ray.
Day one of unschooling, and I've got my kids helping me to clean the car out, teaching them hard work, taking care of the things that you love, that you need, but also just needed the car clean. Also teaching them how to follow instructions. Now they're going to go grocery shopping with me, and we're going to learn about reading labels. We're going to learn about math and money and spending your money wisely. When you're buying groceries, you need to make sure that the quality of it is good. So turn it over on each one, make sure that there's no molded ones, make sure they all look pretty good, and if they do, put them in a buggy. So far we got 2 bags of yellow potatoes, we make homemade french fries, we have bananas, 2 things of grapes, 3 things of blueberries, 2 things of strawberries. You see the prices on them right here? You typically want to make sure that you pick the lowest price, and if it's a low price and it looks like it's a good apple, like Honey Crisp, orange, you can get a bag of those. So we're going to get a whole pineapple because if you get a cut one, it's more expensive. It's cheaper to just get one yourself and cut it. Make sure that you open them, make sure they're not broken. Okay. When you're reading the labels, I want you to just notice where it says it includes added sugars. How many does that say? 0 on that one and 15 on. So we don't want sugars, right? So you're going to get that one. Okay? And the whole point of this is that I have so much more time with them to teach them things like this. This is going to actually help them like actually help them in life. So if you're not a hater, double tap the screen and more.
Are these good things to teach your kids? Yes. Can you have your kids learn these things and also have them go to school? Also yes. In fact, most kids go to school and also help their parents clean the car and also have to help their parents at the grocery store. It's called doing chores. That's just called parenting. Let's take a look again at this moment right here.
When you're reading the labels, I want you to notice where it says includes added sugars. How many does that say? 0 on that one and 15 on. So we don't want sugars, right? So you're going to get that one.
Okay, at first it looks like she's actually trying to help her kid learn to read. Maybe she's helping this kid learn to compare numbers. The kid has to read the label to see how many added sugars there are, and then they have to compare it to another item to be able to tell which has more and which has less. Okay, that's actually pretty good. That's a real-world application of some actual educational concepts. But what does Kelsey do?
0 on that one and 15 on. So we don't want sugars, right? So you're going to get that one.
She doesn't even let the kid figure it out. She's impatient because she needs to finish filming this TikTok for her big following to keep her engagement up so people will keep buying her shitty pyramid scheme products. So instead, she just tells the kid, that's a 0, right? So we're gonna get that one, right? How about we wait another 10 seconds to just see if the kid can get to the answer on their own? Do we want more sugar or less sugar in our food? Less sugar? That's right. So let's read these 2 labels. How many grams of added sugar does this one have? Give the kid a minute to read. 0. Okay, and how many does this one have? 15 grams. Is 15 more or less than 0? 15 is more than 0. So which one should we get? No, not even trying to help the kid reason their way to the answer. She just tells them which one to get, and the kid didn't even need to be paying attention at any point in this interaction for it to be complete.
Also, I wanted to homeschool, unschool, but I'm afraid my kid's being antisocial because we don't get out of the house often. The biggest lie that we've ever been told in our lives is the fact that we need to go to a school where there's 30 other kids in our classroom socializing is that we have no idea who they are. We need to build these socialization skills through going away from our parents for 8 hours a day. It is the biggest lie in the history of life, okay? We don't actually need socialization skills. We need to know how to communicate, which you can do with your parents. We need to know how to connect, which you can do with your parents. And those are skills that you take for the rest of your life to make friendships, to go out and be able to get a good job if you want to go out and be on social media if you want to make whatever. But those are the skills that you need to learn inside of your home. Because what happens when you send your kid to a classroom for 8 hours a day with 15, 20, 30, however many fucking kids, all day, every single day, guess what that does? That is outside influences impacting your child. And realistically, you're not raising your child alone. You're raising your child in the school system. Because what they're going to learn isn't just coming from you. The beliefs they're going to have aren't just coming from you. You're raising your child with everyone else. That is why I'm choosing to.
Alright, first I'm gonna start with what she's right about. 30 to 40 kids in a classroom is way too large of a class size. I've taught in schools that have had 15 kids per classroom, and I've taught in schools that had 40 kids per classroom. Guess which group of kids had an easier time learning? Guess which group was farther ahead in their reading skills, and which group I was able to give more individualized attention when they were progressing on their writing? It's true that class sizes in many schools, especially those in big cities, are much too large. And that's an issue that has to do with zoning, with resource allocation, with the ways that the government oversees public schools in general. Yes, this is a serious issue we have with too many kids per adult in each class, and that is also detrimental to kids' education. I completely agree that the public school system, especially in certain parts of the country, including right here in Chicago, a lot of it needs some serious reform. But that doesn't mean the answer is to just take all of that away from them. Think of it like food, okay? Imagine you're going through a rough spot financially and you can't afford healthy food or fresh food for your kids. Right now, all you can afford is processed food or canned food or something. Does processed food have health issues? Is it not as good for your body in the long run? Yeah, sure. Should you A, feed your kids the processed food in the meantime, or B, not feed your kids at all and let them starve while you try to save up to afford organic vegetables? Obviously, you don't fucking starve your child. Yes, many public schools have their issues, but that means you should try to be part of the solution. Maybe get involved with your local school board, get involved with other parents, stay informed, and vote for the neighborhood alderman or the city mayor based on their plans for education reform. It doesn't mean deny your kids an education at all. Everything else she said in this video was so very wrong. I think she has a misunderstanding of what people mean by socialization. It's not just about learning to have the ability to talk to other people. It's about learning to work collaboratively with people your own age. It's about learning, ideally with the guidance of a teacher or another adult in charge, how to sort out disagreements, how to understand different people's perspectives. Like, Kelsey doesn't want to understand different people's perspectives. She says right there in her video that she wants to raise her kid by herself, that she's terrified of the school teaching them different values from her own. And that's probably like the biggest red flag for pyramid scheme indoctrination. When we've talked about multi-level marketing companies on this channel, we've discussed how they push information control. They don't want you researching the company on your own. They don't want you listening to testimonies of people who left the company. They want you to listen to their side of the story alone, because then you will be financially and emotionally trapped in this organization. It's a cult tactic, and she's using it on her own children. Believe it or not, all of this is actually barely the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the grifter mess that is Kelsey Ray. I cannot get into all of this woman's scandals here, but if you want to learn about all the shit she's done, watch the deep dive that my friend Savannah Marie posted a few months ago. I will link it below. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I joined a Facebook group called Radical Unschooling Info, which is a place for parents to ask questions about the process of unschooling their kids. And some of the stuff in this group was genuinely horrifying. This is a group run by Sandra Dodd, an author who has written books about unschooling and the benefits of keeping your kid away from school. She has raised 3 kids, none of whom have ever been inside a classroom, and her advice for these parents is horrifying. So one mom says, "New here, so glad I found this group. My son is 10 and a half and we have always unschooled. He is starting to ask for more academics. He likes to do things independently, so I was thinking maybe workbooks. Have any of you used anything that isn't lame?" Okay, so this mom's heart is in a good place. Her son is showing an interest in math and she's excited to teach it to him. Even better, her son is an independent learner who's very self-motivated. This kid is straight up asking his mom to just give him some math problems to do on his own. This kid is the perfect example of a kid who could thrive in unschooling, right? This kid is getting satisfaction solely out of the joy in the process of solving the problem, of finding the answer. This is what it's supposed to look like, right? So what does Sandra suggest? The problem with workbooks and academics is that it moves quickly towards school at home and away from unschooling. If there are specific questions of interest he has, you can look into them, maybe find some online videos, preferably open-ended, maybe humorous presentations on that topic. Not of that topic, not the course or curriculum. So the mom replies, "This is what we've always done. He's just asking for something he can sit down and work on himself." Sandra's like, "No, don't give him workbooks. They use workbooks in school and everything about school is bad, so don't do it." The mom here is like, "Okay, but I've already done those other things you suggested and now he wants to learn more. Is there something he can do on his own?" So Sandra gives the mom more resources, which of course are from her own website. There is lots of humor in the world. Math humor, puzzles, online games, and magic tricks. Map humor galore. What is he interested in? Consider some ideas here. Looking at the potential depth and breadth of radical unschooling might undo your desire for independent academics. So the mom replies again, "We've always radically unschooled. He's interested in being able to sit down and do some math problems and such on his own. His only math has been through cooking, building, sewing, games, etc. He's interested in farming, riding horses, raising cows, anything with wheels and a motor, building, etc." So Sandra's basically like, you need to, quote, undo your desire for independent academics. This isn't the mom's desire, Sandra, it is her son's desire. He said he wants to learn to do math independently, and you're telling him no. I thought unschooling was supposed to be about learning independently. So the mom is like, okay, yeah, we already did that. He wants to learn to do math problems on his own, but you're telling me he's not allowed to do that. So another mom chimes in to do more of Sandra's bidding for her. It would be useful to look at your own reaction to your son's request and also the reasons for his request. Does he believe he's not learning because his learning looks different than movies, TV, maybe friends who go to school? I'm not you or privy to your thought process. This is meant more for general conversations than you personally, but if it resonates with you personally, it's an opportunity to look deeper at your own motivations and beliefs and discover where your son's thoughts are. As much as possible, we stay away from curriculum or formal learning recommendations here. There are many other spaces where you can get recommendations for tools that aren't lame. I'm curious if you felt that in asking here, you'd get unschooler approved recommendations. Dude, no, this mom has been very upfront from the beginning. Her son likes math. He wants to do it on his own. You guys all told her that workbooks are bad. So she's asking if you have any other recommendations to help him do math problems on his own. Everybody keeps trying to get this mom to stop letting her kid do math. What the fuck? So this mom then replies, he's just expressing that he's ready to learn to read and he likes math and has said that workbooks he's seen look fun. Yes, I was hoping for some more unschooly type of recommendations, things he can just do when and if he wants to. Winter is coming, so less outside time. Whoa. Okay, so now we've learned that this 10-and-a-half-year-old kid who is likely in 4th or 5th grade, meaning almost middle school. Wait, no, sorry, he's not in any grade because he doesn't go to school, but if he did go to school, he'd be getting ready for middle school. This kid doesn't know how to read either. The mom says he's expressing that he's ready to start learning to read, and the kid straight up said that he thinks workbooks look fun to him. If he's interested in the workbooks, give him the workbooks. Wasn't the whole philosophy behind unschooling in the first place supposed to be that you guide children in response to their interests? This kid is interested in reading and math right now. He even said he wants to try the workbooks. Nobody's forcing him. So another one of Sandra's sidekicks replies, I would ask what your son means when he's asking for more academics, as it seems an unusual choice of words for a 10-year-old. I would ask what he wants to learn and why. This could give you great insights and ideas for how to help him with his request. Does he want to learn a specific skill because he needs it for something he wants to do? The mom says, not his words, mine. He recently said he is ready to start learning to read, and he has said in the past that those workbooks look fun. I'm not shocked that everyone is missing what this mom is saying. Nobody here believes in learning to read, so it's no surprise that nobody can understand the words this mom is saying. Also, workbooks can absolutely be fun. Some of them are like coloring books with puzzles and games. Like, give that to your son. He's literally begging for just a scrap of education. On Reddit, I found this post in r/applying to college called, I grew up unschooled. Is college possible? Little story time. Unschooled is like homeschooled, but your parents don't school you for anything and don't let you do online school either. It's formally called fluency and is illegal in every state in the US. Luckily, I used Khan Academy and love the sciences, so I never fell behind much, but because even when I begged my mom to let me take online classes because I wanted honors and AP programs, but she said no because it will take time away from her with me. So I got my GED. Most of my stats are 80th percentile. I'm doing my SATs this month and next month. My score projection should be 1250 to 1300, and 1250 is greater than 75% of students accepted at the college I want to go to. But I don't have a GPA, and I want to go into biology. Just to my state school, and almost no one goes into biology without honors or AT, and not to mention applying to colleges and explaining that I graduated from freaking Taco Bell Dookie University. And sadly, community college isn't an option for me, as that would require me to continue living with my mother, and I wouldn't want to go either. It's just so hard being unschooled. I feel like my GED scores are phony and meaningless. All I've ever gotten from the abuse I faced is, aw, tough one, buddy. And I'm not stupid, but I feel like no university would want an unschooled person. Like, my parents really ruined my life before I even got a say in it. And when I did, I wish I didn't. I wish I could say they did it on accident, like I was accidentally neglected, but it makes me sick to realize my parents did it for control. I wish I had classes. I wish I ate lunches alone. I wish I accidentally fell asleep on my desk studying for an AP I wish I didn't enroll in. I wish I could time travel back in time and call CPS, but I'm grown now and I need to let go. So is college possible? When I'm in the comments on people's TikToks and Instagram posts, I keep seeing people ask things like, what if your kid wants to go to college? To which these parents keep responding, college isn't for everyone. College isn't the only option. And I agree, it's not the only option. but it is an option. And it's an option that a lot of kids will want to be available to them. You can't claim you're trying to give your kids more freedom, but then cut them off from so many future educational and career options. That's the opposite of freedom. You're essentially keeping your own kids prisoner. It's true that public school is not perfect. It has its flaws, and a lot of those flaws are very serious and need to be addressed. But it's also worth remembering that as a concept, public school is one of the greatest social goods that humanity as a whole has ever seen. Since the introduction of public schools to society at large, humans have advanced in intelligence in ways that no other species has ever been able to. I cannot emphasize enough how important the availability of public school is for everyone to have access to it. Maybe because in the US we're now in a generation where most of us had parents who went to school and grandparents who went to school. Like if this were a century ago, most of us would have relatives who had to leave school at 13 or earlier to go work in the factory or something, parents or siblings who didn't even get access to any education at all. But now education has become a lot more normalized, and a lot of people have started to take it for granted as a result. I think that is so unfortunate because every child needs to have a right to an education. I want to know your guys' thoughts on all this in the comments below. Again, I think there are so many valid critiques to have of various school systems, and I think that there are parents who are really putting in the work to homeschool their kids well, or who are taking different approaches to education that do have solid learning goals and objectives in mind, and I have respect for those parents. But it's other parents who think that like they don't have to teach their kids anything, and that they're sticking it to the system, and that if you want to stick it to the system, even if your kid isn't able to read or do basic math, like I think that that is just unacceptable. So I want to know your guys' thoughts on all this in the comments below. I will see you guys again soon for another video, but in the meantime, teach your kids to read. Bye!
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Top yours, wolf moralist. We'll see who counts who.
Finish their patron off.
Well, someone's looking to make a statement.
Lightning. Lightning out. The urn is ours. Can you
Keeping the good, the city. Yeah, that's Vitality. Lifesteal. Lifesteal. Spirit. Spirit. Okay.